As a kid, I had seen my father treating so many patients and getting well, and I was attracted to it. But the turning point really was when I saw it working on myself. For a doctor, every patient is important. So it's not what's happened in the past. Nobody cares whether you treated 10,000 patients or 5,000 patients or 200 patients. They only want to know what's in it for me. What can you do for me?
Every young girl I talk to, they all have PCOS and everybody's struggling.
Yes, PCOS is very, very common. And there's polycystic ovarian syndrome or disease. So really there's no reason, no known reason. And a lot of young girls are getting it. Right? And of course, a lot of women are getting it, I would say, but it starts also young, at a young age. You think that you're getting all right when you're taking allopathy because it's a suppressive treatment.
It is a suppressive
and it's a
treatment,
palliative
yes.
treatment. So let me give you another example. For example, psoriasis. It's a skin condition. And you apply an ointment, then it disappears. But it never disappears because you had it for 30, 40 years. You take homeopathy, it may take 1 year, it may take 2 years, but then it disappears, never comes back.
There are people who say that there is steroids that sometimes, added in homeopathy. And I would really like you to tell this for our listeners who are all across the world and in India, how much of that is really false.
So the first thing is, people believe that homeopathy is slow. The question that you asked me earlier. And they tend to believe that if you get the right medicine and you get a quick result, then there must be something wrong. It's not possible. ऐसा तो हो नहीं सकता. So therefore must be steroid to get quick results. Believe in yourself. That's the strongest message I can give. Because I believed in myself. Against all hardships, I kind of pushed and ultimately got there.
Hi, welcome to the Mohua Show. My name is Mohua Chinappa and I am an author, entrepreneur and ex-housewife. This podcast is about everything from business to technology to arts to lifestyle, but done and spoken ईमानदारी से. Hi, in today's episode we have with us Dr. Mukesh Batra. He is the founder of the Batra Group of companies and with 5 decades of experience as a practitioner of homeopathy and with many books under his belt. Today, we are going to talk to him about what it took for him to become the pioneer of homeopathy in India. Dr. Batra is not just known in the field of homeopathy, he has also received the prestigious Padma Shri in 2012. He joins us today to discuss homeopathy and his recent book, The Nation's Homeopath, and his entire inspiration and the start of his journey. The minute we talk of homeopathy, we know that it is synonymous. Dr. Mukesh Batra and homeopathy is a synonymous name. We all know that and you too know that. So tell me, how did this entire practice begin? Was it somebody in your family that you saw or how did you get into homeopathy? Let's go back to the old Dr. Mukesh Batra and how did he start
You
this?
mean the young Dr. Mukesh Batra? The old one is whom we are talking to now. So,
the earlier Dr. Mukesh Batra.
all right, that's nice. Well, so yes, I belong to a family of doctors, and my mother was an allopathic doctor. She was actually one of the first lady doctors from Lady Harding in India. And my father was a homeopathic doctor, and he was the principal of a college in Lucknow. And so actually, like I say jokingly, that I was a mixopath because I was born out of homeopathy and allopathy both. However, I really actually had no idea of being a doctor because I saw that my parents were awfully busy and, they were really not available for us as kids. So it really happened by chance. And I think my whole life has been like that. And I actually wanted to go for hotel management. And so I went into one of the hotels, which was owned by one of my uncles. And he said, you go there. And the first thing the guy told me is, the owner, he said, you come with me, and took me straight to the kitchen. And he said, no, start sweeping. This is what you have to do. This is where you begin. Start washing the dishes. And then he took me to housekeeping and said, now you clean the beds and you clean the toilets. And I thought it was a glamorous line. And I said, no, this is not for me. So I said, no, let me go back to medicine. That's much, much easier and much nicer. So I then, at that time, then my father moved from Lucknow to Mumbai, which was that time called Bombay. I still think that was a nicer name. And now, of course, we all used to Mumbai as well. So he then took over a new college, homeopathy college. And so that time the trustees used to come home and they said, we want, the children of good families to take up to homeopathy. So I really, unlike today where it's like you got to get 91, 92% marks to get into homeopathy college, At that time, uh, the trustees came to my house and said, "Okay, why don't you give your son to us so that we can, have another homeopath in our profession?" And then that's how really homeopathy started, because I took it up because I thought it was the easiest thing to do. Because I said my father is a doctor, he's a homeopath, he has some practice, and I can always then take over from him, and I don't have to work hard. I didn't have to appear for any exam, after my senior Cambridge, as it was called at that time, or ICSE, and I can just I'm getting admission into a college without having to be competitive. So I said, well, let me get there. But when I went there, then of course I was a student leader and I conducted a couple of strikes as well because of fee highs and other things. But I didn't realize that homeopathy is really wonderful. And even though as a kid I had seen my father treating so many patients and getting well, and I was attracted to it. But the turning point really was when I saw it working on myself. I was the general secretary of my college, and as you know, we have more girls than boys in homeopathy. So there were a lot of girls around, and I had my annual day, and I had a few warts on my face, and I took some medicine, and then they just erupted even more, and so ultimately I had maybe 24 warts on my face all over, and I had my annual day coming, and I said, I can't go like this. And then luckily my father, who was the principal of the college and also practicing, he told me, why don't you take this medicine? It was called Dalkamara. So earlier I had taken Thuja. With Thuja I started proving it. So I started getting dreams as if I was falling off the bed, which is a symptom of Thuja. And I started getting those few 4-5 watts started becoming 24. Just started erupting. And when I took this one dose of Dalkamara, one fine morning, I woke up and I just washed my face like this and wiped it with a towel. And all the warts came on my towel in my hand.
That's absolutely magical.
Yes.
My goodness.
So and then I just had one wart on my neck, which stayed for some more time. And I called it the swear wart. I said, I can swear and, it never fall off, so it doesn't really matter. So I can tell all the lies in the world that I want to tell. But then ultimately I took another dose of that, and that also fell off. Now this story is about probably 60 years old or 55 years old. And I don't have a single wart on my body for the last 55 years. So I've experienced homeopathy in person. Of course, I've seen it on other patients as well. Like I said, on my father's patients and other homeopaths as well. And in my college as well, with other doctors. But when I experienced it myself, I then realized that this is the system of medicine that one should really work hard. And, and this is something that you can reach out to people and heal them. And so I became very passionate about it. So much so that, I actually started, even teaching, students from, my older students from the higher classes. They came to me for learning. And I used to start, actually, giving them classes in free of cost, of course, on certain subjects. And what was interesting was that even during that time, I actually realized that for homeopathy, because it's mind and body medicine, one needs to have a little bit of psychological training as well. And so what is very interesting, which a lot of people don't know, is that I actually did 2 degrees. That time it was a diploma in homeopathy. So it was a 4.5-year course from Bombay University. And then I did my arts in clinical psychology and entrepreneurology and all those, kind of, crazy things and economics as well. But mainly psychology from Pune University. So, in medicine, we had exams after 1.5 years, 18 months. So I would appear for one exam here in Mumbai University, and then I'd go to Pune, and then appear for another exam over there in a totally different subject. And with no training whatsoever, just self-read. And that's how I think I then understood, and that helped me actually become a better doctor, because, understanding human beings and getting an insight into people's minds is very important for medicine. There's a saying, and they say the science of medicine is the art of healing. So, while it is a science, but it's also an art, because you need to be perceptive. And I always say this, that, this is also how my photography has helped me, because a lot of people see, but very few people perceive. And when you perceive, you're actually seeing with insight. And therefore, you actually catch things. As a photographer, I catch things that other people don't see. And when I have my exhibitions and I, put them out, oh, but I was also with you, but I didn't see this. When was this? But you caught it in a second. It also then allows you to take, decisions very quickly, and obviously the right ones. So I think, that's how I then became a doctor. And then, of course, I wanted to practice on my own, even though my father had a decent practice and he was doing well, and he had quite a lot of good patients as well. And I said, no, I want to branch out, because I then realized that medicine is one kind of, a profession which cannot be handed down to anybody. I mean, I've seen so many doctors who are very famous, but people always say, oh, baap bete se bahut acha tha, because they get used to that person, and it's hardly ever when the next generation then gets that
The same acceptance.
the same acceptance as the earlier generation. So it's very difficult. And so, which is why I said that, let me start on my own. And starting on your own was not easy at all, because, joined a charitable clinic, 150 rupees a month, changed 3 buses to go to my place of work, did a charitable stint in Dharavi, Asia's largest slum, for almost 2 years. The idea was really to reach out to people. You have to actually catch them and then tell them that, homeopathy is good. And then people would say, nahi, humko to injection chahiye, without tika, hum theek nahi honge. I mean, that was the kind of concept in the 70s when I actually started evangelizing homeopathy, if I may use that word. And I would actually do that. I would actually catch hold of you, and then until you got convinced, I wouldn't leave you. And until you started the treatment. And of course, it was for free. So I then landed up seeing 375 patients a day. So my reputation grew, because the charitable clinic was in Malabar Hill. So lots of the ministers, and starting with the servants. So I always say that I started from below upwards, not from above downwards, which is actually the right thing to do in management as well. So I started with all the poor people, and then they went and told their bosses and say, that's a good doctor. We've become all right. Why don't you also go there? And that's how then I started getting then film stars, and then I started getting all the ministers and politicians, and then there's an interesting story that next to my clinic there was Sefi Mel, which is the Bade Mullah's house over there. And his mother had some problem, and so they said, he's a very good doctor, you have to call him. And I remember that I was invited to kind of treat his mother. And they have a separate Janana wing where men are not allowed. And of course, that time I had no car, nothing. As I said, I used to go in buses and change buses to go to my place of work. So very courteous and kind, and the Bade Mullah said, okay, I'll send the car to you to pick you up. And so I got a Dodge car. I still remember it was an old Dodge with black glasses. And the car came to pick me up. So I was sitting in the car. And as the car was driving around and coming nearer to the Bade Mullah's house, I saw everybody prostrating in front of the car. They thought the Bade Mullah was there. And, when they came to know that, there's a doctor inside and he's been called, I think you know how faith works. So I actually got all the Boris as my patients after that. I had a long line of them, seriously. And then, and then that kind of picked up. And then, of course, and then I said, now I must start my own practice. And then starting practice was not easy, because no doctor was willing to share even a polyclinic with me, because they said, homeopath hai, wo to hamara bhada hi nahi dega. Leave aside anything else. And when I wanted to start my own clinic in 1982, medicine was not an industry, it was not recognized. So banks would not give loan. And I had to borrow money from, so-called friends at the rate of 36% per annum. That's 3% per month, which was the highest rate. At that time, that was the rate, the rate of interest in Bollywood, because it was the riskiest profession. There was no corporatization over there. And it was not organized. It was not actually organized industry. So it was very risky, and the rates of interest were very high. So I paid similar rates, and I continued paying that for the next 10 years of my life. So my investors, if I may use that word, it's a modern word today, but that time, the people who loaned me money, I was actually working for them for the first 10 years of my career.
Wow.
And just repaying them back.
So you have to tell our listeners, how many clinics do you have? I mean, because that's obviously an investment from your side. And how did you decide to go all out? I mean, first, I think we need to know the number. How many number of clinics do you have?
So actually, I lose count, because as we talk, we may add 1 or 2 more. But presently, 225 clinics in 6 countries and about in 150 cities. So
We need to repeat that again. Goodness, that is so amazing, because I think so many, people who are wanting to learn medicine, do you think that they are very open to going into homeopathy? The choice between homeopathy and allopathy. Most people choose allopathy because I think earning is a little easier there. So you obviously have like shaken the entire, narrative of what a homeopathic doctor can do. So what was it that got you to be here? Because everybody can't do this, Mukesh.
like I said, it just happened by accident. I think I'm just blessed. The right things happen at the right time, and and also as they say, you always have necessity is the mother of invention, right? And that's what's happened with me as well. And I also believe that when you do good, then always good comes back. So I'll give you two examples which will kind of explain what I'm saying and talking about. So the first was that when my son was just going to pass out, and he's also a homeopath, and he's completed 25 years now, and I'm completing 50 years next month of practice. So when he was to pass out, I didn't want him to work with me because I didn't work with my father. So I wanted him to have an independent identity of his own for the same reason, that he could grow and he could evolve. And then my brother was here, and one of my brothers was a kind of a builder here, and he was a developer here, and he was building something. So he said, and I said, I can't afford for my son a property in Mumbai, which I didn't have that kind of money. I couldn't do it. So I said, okay, part of my family is in Bangalore. Why don't I just move my son here? And so for 1 year, I went up and down and actually created the first clinic here in Alsur, and which was in my brother's building. And he gave me, again, payment facilities. He said, you pay whenever you can. And that's how then I set up my first clinic here in 1996. And I was very passionate about it because it was for my son. And as luck would have it, then that clinic just started doing extremely well.
Yes.
And I then started working 10 days in Bangalore and 20 days in Mumbai. And the idea was that I would give my son a set practice, and you didn't have to work. You could just take it off from there. I mean, it did so well that we actually, in 1 or 2 months, we actually broke the turnover of a large hospital over here. So we started doing well, and then the idea was that I used to have my own doctors. I used to train them, and I used to, place them in clinics. But I used to treat patients myself. So they were still assistants, so they would take the case history, they would do all the preliminary, and then I would come and see the patient. Mm-hmm. So patients would wait for 15, 20 days for me to come and actually treat them. And then word got around, and it was also very, very humbling and very challenging. Because, unlike other systems of medicine, other professions, medicine is one system where people don't care about statistics, And I always say this, it's like, they say God sits in the box office every Friday, right? Because if in a Friday, when the movie is released, it goes up, then, the price of the Khans goes up, or the Khannas go up. And if it flops, then it stays at that level or goes down. So every Friday is important for a film star. For a doctor, every patient is important. So it's not what's happened in the past. Nobody cares whether you treated 10,000 patients or 5,000 patients or 200 patients. They only want to know what's in it for me. What can you do for me? Can you help me or not? And the first question that I was asked, which I think was it kind of kept me so grounded, that whole experience, that every time I went to a new city, people, अच्छा बॉम्बे में तो आपने पेशेंट देख लिया है, बैंगलोर में आपने किसको ठीक किया? So unless you treat somebody in Bangalore, unless the person got all right, you had no credibility, because medicine runs on trust, and they want to see it. So you got to have proof of concept, what you call in management now POC, proof of concept, and that only comes through happy patients. So unless you can make patients happy, unless you can cure them, unless you can spread the good word around, word of mouth. That time there was no social media, nothing. That was the only way to kind of get people around. Unless you do that. So it was very important that you succeed in every case that you take up. And even if I failed in one patient, for that patient I was a failure. And so it's such a grounding thing, it's such a leveling thing. And the same thing happened. Then the other story was that I had another young girl who was with me for a few years, and she was going to get married in Baroda. And again, that time it was called Baroda, now it's Vadodara. So, names change, but places don't. So she said, sir, I worked with you for 2, 3 years, but I'm getting married, but my in-laws will not allow me to practice unless I work with you. I said, no, you can't work with me in Mumbai when you're getting married in Baroda. No, sir, for your son, you opened a clinic in Bangalore. I'm like your daughter, now you must open a clinic for me in Baroda. I said, no, that's a little too much now because, and again, I didn't have money. I'm saying I was trained because, that also cost me a lot of money and it was not easy. So she said, no, sir, for me, you must do it. I said, all right, call your fiance, ask him to come and meet me. So he came to meet me. I said, will you look after the clinic? And he was working in a pharma company because, in Gujarat and Baroda and all that, there's a lot of big pharma over there. So I said, will you come evening time after your office? Will you just come and just look after the clinic, manage it? Then I will start this clinic for your wife. I started the clinic. This is now, again, probably 1997 or something like that. So it's been like, so many hundreds of years. Today we own a building over there. It's one of our largest revenue clinics today in the country.
You've got the Midas
And
touch.
again, it's not the Midas touch. I'm saying it's really, when you do good, because I did it for a good reason. Because
You wanted to help.
I wanted to help.
Yes.
And my mother always had this, little poem which I remember that, life is an echo, all comes back. Life is an echo, all comes back. The good, the false, the true. So give the world the best you have, and the best will come back to you.
Oh my God. You touched my heart.
And
And,
so
I so agree with this adage. Absolutely.
And so I've been doing that all my life. So when you do good, you get good. And when you do bad, then you get bad. When you think positive, you get happiness. When you think negative, you get sadness.
But then
And
you
get
can't
depression.
deny negativity in today's world,
But you have to learn how to deal with it.
Yeah, so let's just talk a little bit about a few diseases that I think are really on the rise. I mean, you see, every young girl I talk to, they all have PCOS and everybody's struggling. I mean, it's so strange because I am born in the 70s and I have no idea as to what is PCOS. So I feel that maybe, today terminology in the medical world is a lot more about mental health, and all of this is discussed much more barely than what was done in the past. So tell me a little bit about how homeopathy can really help a patient who's suffering from PCOS. Mental health, as you're talking about your next book, which you're going to come to after this.
Sure.
Is there any case study that you'd like to share with us, for our listeners to know?
No, so there are many. I mean, what I'd like to highlight over here is that, yes, PCOS is very, very common. And, there's polycystic ovarian syndrome or disease, we call it PCOS.
Why is it happening so much now?
So really, there's no reason, no known reason. And a lot of young girls are getting it. Right? And of course, a lot of women are getting it, I would say, but it starts also young, at a young age. And, we treat a lot of hair loss patients. And one of the first symptoms of PCOS is hair loss. So people come to us, women who come to us for loss of hair, and they have a little hair on the chin, just a little bit of hair on the chin that you notice, and they have irregular periods. Then we suspect that they've got PCOS, and when they do a sonography, they actually have it. They have cysts in their ovaries, and because of that, this happens. So obviously, it's a hormonal problem, and it probably has something to do with the kind of food that we eat. For example, we know that the animals that people eat today, I'm a vegetarian for the last many, many years, but if you have one on your plate, it's been fed and grown with hormones. And a lot of these hormones then go into your system as well. So that could be one reason, because I think the kind of food that we are eating today is contaminated. And then that contamination comes into our body, because earlier we had healthier food. We were living in the fields. We had, fresh. Today, organic food today is a fashion. That time it was a reality.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you.
Without calling. So I think it has something to do with the kind of food, the fast food that we're eating. It's something to do with the hormones in the food that we eat. And then I think that is what actually then goes into young women. I think that's why we find a lot of this. Also, I think there's a lot of stress and pressure in today's world for performance, for competition everywhere. Too many people for the same kind of job or the position. Even to get admission into a college is so difficult. And I remember a very interesting thing over here now that you mentioned that. So, I started a clinic in Mauritius in 1996, which is also by accident. And it's such a beautiful place, so serene, and, it's got a small little island, but it's like perfect. And when I started, I legislated homeopathy there. When I started treating patients there in my clinic, I then realized Mauritius had at that time the highest number of young people suicides in the world. And it got me thinking. And I said, such a beautiful place, idyllic, so beautiful, everything is right. Look at the sunrise, look at the sunset.
Really?
Yes. And
I didn't know this.
Yes, I'm talking about in the 90s.
96.
In the 90s. I said, how can it be that young people are committing the highest rate of suicides in young people in the world, in one of the most idyllic and peaceful islands in that sense? What was the reason? The reason was they had no colleges and they had only very few high schools. So in the 5th standard, everybody got education till the 5th standard. In the 5th standard, all kids had to appear for a competitive exam to get into college, to get into school, to get into secondary school. Everybody couldn't get it. So there was so much of peer pressure and so much of pressure of parental pressure that otherwise they become a school dropout in the 5th standard and their career is gone. So it was because of the pressure that was put on young children who were in the 5th standard that so many of them committed suicide. Now, of course, they have better education systems but I'm just saying, so this is how it is. So a lot of it also has to do with the stress. It has to do with the competitiveness in today's society. I'm saying today, we were just talking about the traffic when it took me 2 hours to get from the airport to here. I mean, it's so stressful. See, you're stressful at home today because there's domestic violence, there's incompatibility between partners, there's an oppression from parents as well sometimes, because everybody's not financially independent. You go to work, it's very competitive.
Absolutely.
You have to perform well or you're outperformed, then you're left behind. I've done a lot of research on this, and it actually shows that the person who causes you the most stress is always an immediate boss. Mm-hmm. So if your immediate boss is a nice guy or a girl and he's very nice to you and treats you well, you're happy. But that person can make your life miserable.
Yes, I agree with you.
And if that happens and there's a conflict and you can't leave the job, so you got to live with it. So you have a bad partner at home and you've got a bad partner in that sense in the office as well. And when you're going up and down from home to office and office to home is also stressful. Because if you're in a train, you can fall off. You can be sandwiched. Okay, if you're on the road, you can get a traffic accident. And even if you don't, then when you want to go home on time and then you reach 1 hour late and then you go to catch up with all your homework and housework and all that,
yes,
you're not able to do it. So it's stressful. So the entire life today has become stressful.
Yeah, but then we can't go back to store living, so we'll have to probably just navigate.
No, but we have to learn how to deal with it.
We have to learn
how to deal with it.
Yeah. So, Dr. Mukesh Batra, I also want you to tell us about a lot of homes, they administer homeopathic medicines on their own. And I remember as a child, the minute you get hurt, they would give me arnica. Yeah. Then I think in my home, there was always an arnica kept, kambot mein. What are your views on this?
So yes and no. The first thing is that, let me tell you a little story about homeopathy, because I think life is all about storytelling, and the more interesting it is, the better people understand it. So, homeopathy was founded by a German doctor, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann. Everybody knows that. And he gave up his practice and he found homeopathy. I'm not going into details of that now. But one of his students and followers was an Austrian doctor, Dr. Honigberger. And he became quite famous. And so in the Punjab, during Maharaja Ranjit Singh's reign, he lost his voice and he had paralysis of the vocal cord. And he heard then that this doctor, who's a homeopath, is a good guy and he can treat people very well. So he was invited to Punjab. He treated this guy, he became all right. And from that time onwards, that's how homeopathy entered India, and then it went to Bengal. So the traditional thing is everybody thinks that homeopathy is Bengali, and because all Bengalis believe in it, and there's a pharmacy on every road, there are 10, 12 of them on every road, every lane has got it. They all read books and they all practice, as you said. But it was then the missionaries who actually took it forward.
Okay.
Because it was cheap, easily available, it had no side effects, or so it was believed. So it was easy for a lot of missionaries then to open free clinics. And that's how it got popular. It then got also popular by, that's why I said good and bad. It also then got popular because lots of people who wanted to help started reading books and started practicing. So you would get somebody who retired from judiciary, somebody who retired as an IS officer, somebody, wanting you to do good. And they got good results, You got a lot of housewives practicing at home, and then saying, I give it to all my staff.
My great grandmother was a homeopath doctor.
Oh, wonderful. So that's a great heritage.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how you're so beautiful because, it's in your genes. That's why. So homeopathy is, people who start taking homeopathy when they're young, they actually grow up to be very, very nice and beautiful and healthy. They're very important because it's good to start young, not wait till you fall sick and then you get diabetes and you get hypertension and then try to treat it. So a lot of people actually popularized homeopathy. So the good part was that because these people started, treating everybody and they got good results, homeopathy got popular and nobody paid for it. So which is why the biggest challenge was that when you wanted to actually professionalize homeopathy, it was good for free, but not good if you had to pay, then you had to go to a consultant. That's how it was in the 70s. Now, of course, that's changed. And also now it's legal now. It's illegal now to practice homeopathy unless you're qualified. So you have to now go through a 5.5-year medical, course. After that is 3 years of MD. And then at Dr. Batas, we have an academy with the Mumbai University. And then we have a 1-year super specialized course in dermatology. We are starting one in oncology and so on and so forth. So it's actually a 10-year period now. Like a 10-year window before you actually become a qualified homeopath. And it's illegal now to practice if you just read books. In spite of that, people do it, in their homes, and they're reaching out and helping people. So one side, it popularized things. On the other side, then they were not medical doctors, and therefore sometimes you could miss something which was important, like a diagnosis, for example, which was a serious diagnosis. And so then it also gets a bit of flack as well. Today, like I said, it's only the qualified doctors who can practice. And even when there is self-practice, and for example, when I write books like this, the idea is that today medical advice, if I leave aside Dr. Google, which is free and not really great, but is very expensive. It's very difficult to get to a doctor. It's very difficult to get a doctor's time. So self-help books like this, like the ones that I write about homeopathy and how you can treat yourself, are actually very useful. But what I want to mention here is that there are two different parts of treatment. See, one is what is called a constitutional treatment homeopathy. That is something that you do after you've studied the whole case, the personality, and I've written that in my book as well. The way you dress, the way you look, what is your personality, and then because of that, what kind of problem you could get, and therefore what homeopathic medicine you would need. So, for example, I've seen with my experience of over 50 years that, people, for example, who suffer from migraine are type A personalities because they're very, very particular, very meticulous. They will match everything. The nail polish is matching, the lipstick is matching, the clothes are matching. They're very particular about their appearance. And they're like selfie queens, if I may use that word in today's technology, modern word. And so to do that kind of a study, it needs a qualified homeopath. And that kind of a study goes to the root of the problem. And that kind of cures you from within and cures you for a long time. So that's a cure kind of a thing. Every cure is relative, but that's a cure. On the other hand, you have cold, you have cough, you have a diarrhea at home, you have, all these little niggling things that keep happening in everybody's home. That's when books like that come in use. And that's when you don't need to go to a doctor because you can nip it in the bud. You can save sometimes hospitalization because you don't get dehydrated because you've treated yourself. So for acute problems which are limiting, which are, not so serious, you can treat yourself with homeopathy. And for chronic problems which are, holistic, you need constitutional treatment for which you should go to a qualified doctor.
And that sometimes takes very long, am I right?
So it's again relative because, life is relative. Everything we see as, not good or bad, but also gray. So I always say this, for example, if you've had a migraine, again, just to give the same example, for 10 years, then you should at least give 1 month for every year of problem that you have. So when you have a chronic problem which is for 10 years, a degenerative problem which is for 20 years, then to treat it from the root, it takes a long time. Because you're then going to the root, you're trying to get to the core of the problem and you're trying to treat it. And you're trying to make sure that the person really gets all right. Because it's such a chronic problem. You think that you're getting all right when you're taking allopathy. because it's a suppressive treatment.
It is a suppressive
And it's a
treatment,
palliative
yes.
treatment. So let me give you another example. For example, psoriasis. It's a skin condition. And you apply an ointment, then it disappears. But it never disappears because you had it for 30, 40 years. You take homeopathy, it may take 1 year, it may take 2 years, but then it disappears, never comes back. So if you look at the time frame again, from that point of view, you're looking at a treatment which lasted 30 years with suppression and no cure, and a treatment lasting for 2 years with no suppression and with a cure. So which is faster? So obviously homeopathy is quicker actually.
Absolutely. I've been a huge follower of homeopathy because it's been something that I have grown up with, Mukesh, and I've, of course, administered that for my child. While I was pregnant, I had a leg ache and I had gone in to meet a doctor in Kolkata. And like you said, that in Bengal, it's very, very prevalent and it's administered to children when we are young. And I did the same for my child because he had a skin condition called urticaria. And I, of course, did not try any allopathy at all. I continued with homeopathy and it took me about 3 or 4 years, but he was cured forever. We also went, into a hill station in Dharamkot and there were bugs in that, they were on the bed there. It was a beautiful resort, but obviously not clean, and we never thought that it would be like that. And we came back and there were these marks all over our hand, and of course, like you said, Thuja. And I and my son, and there was another person who was with us, and he took allopathy, and it continued to stay. The mark stayed on for about 2 years, but mine and my son's Thuja worked wonders with us, and there was no mark, nothing. I mean, it's all like I can't even remember it now any longer.
So you asked the question and you gave the answer.
So absolutely. No, I'm a huge believer, but I'm just saying that for my listeners also that. There are a lot of people who sometimes do turn around and they tell you that because I'm a huge follower and that's something that's been passed. Like I said, my great-grandmother was a homeopathic doctor and my grandmother always had that box with her at home and every child was given that because she knew what to give.
And so had the Queen Mother as well.
You know. So
the royal family in England also.
Yeah, so my Thakurma, which is my father's mother, had that, she had that whole thing kit from her mother that she had kept, So
sometimes that's a better inheritance than jewelry.
Yes, I think so. It's a better inheritance. Just to talk, there are a few people who say that there is steroids that sometimes, added in homeopathy. And I would really like you to tell this for our listeners who are all across the world and in India, how much of that is really false and
so
true.
Obviously there's hogwash.
Yes.
And,
I wanted to hear it from you.
And hogwash, I say particularly because, a lot of it is hearsay. And I'll give you 2 or 3 reasons for it. And also the answer of, therefore, why not? So the first thing is, people believe that homeopathy is slow. The question that you asked me earlier. And they tend to believe that if you get the right medicine and you get a quick result, then there must be something wrong. It's not possible. ऐसा तो हो नहीं सकता. So therefore must be steroid to get quick results. So particularly in cases of asthma, arthritis, these are cases where you get, sometimes it takes long and sometimes you get very good quick results in homeopathy as well. Then something is wrong, kuch mila diya hoga, because then it's presumed that there's something that's added to it, because how can I get, homeopathy is perceived to be slow and I've become all right so quickly, so dal mein kuch kala hai. So dal mein kala nahi hai, but dawai mein steroid hai. Okay, that's the kind of thought that people get. Now, why I'm saying that this is not true, because there are only few kind of labs in India which actually can test for natural steroids and or chemical steroids, and that's like laser chromatography, and there's one in Hyderabad. It takes 2 months. What people do is they actually send the thing to be tested, medicine to be tested to some local lab. Now they're not kind of geared to test it, and therefore the results you get there are not authentic. So just to also let you know that certain plants have natural steroids. And then these show up in these basic tests. And so if you get that, then you'll tell the whole world that, I took medicine and it had steroid. But it's not actually steroid. It's a natural plant which had that little steroid and it's not harmful at all. But what we are talking about is chemical steroids, which are harmful and which is actually a lack of trust, because no doctor would do it. Because
I would like you to tell us a little bit more about this plant steroid. What is it? Please tell us.
No, lots of plants. I mean, not lots of time, but quite a few plants because homeopathic medicine. I would say 70% of medicines are plant-based, but a lot of them are otherwise natural as well. Some are also from poisons, animal venoms, and so on and so much from silica, dust. A lot of things, including moon dust as well. So lots of medicines from different sources actually. I mean, any source you can make a medicine. So some of the plants, out of the 70% of homeopathic medicine are made from plants. Some of the plants have a natural steroid, and sometimes then this shows up in the basic test.
Okay.
And that's it. I mean, a lot of them don't have it, but some of them do. So if you send that particular sample, it shows positive, and then you say, there are steroids in homeopathy, or the doctor has missed it. That's not true. Like I'm saying, no doctor would do it because it's not worth his salt, because it's totally against his principle. We don't even
The
suppress
ethics
treatment,
of
and it's unethical totally.
Yeah.
To put something in something which the patient doesn't know, and then it's actually cheating in some form. So no qualified good homeopath, honest homeopath, ethical homeopath would ever do something like this.
So let's talk a little bit about you being an author.
My first book was published in 1982. I was still very young that time. And I remember the governor of Maharashtra launched it in Air India. It went into many reprints. But of course, I got no royalty for it because that time that's how things were. And it was by a British Indian company who published the book. And it got me a lot of fame. And then it had an Hindi edition as well, which also did reasonably well. And then, of course, I got too busy in my practice and I stopped writing. So then there was a hiatus of many, many years. And then in between, somewhere 10 years ago, then, JACO, they were patients of mine and they approached me, why don't you write on homeopathy? So I then wrote 2-3 books for them, on all of them are like, handbooks for homeopathy in different forms. So I did that. And then there was another distributor who was also a patient of mine, and they had a very large distribution, IBD, Hakin Chatlani. So he was also a friend. So he said, why don't you do a book for me? So then I did another book for him called Common Ailments. So it was, Every Man's Guide to Homeopathy, Common Ailments. So, like I said, these are all kind of handbooks for helping and self-help for different aspects of homeopathy. And, but that was like, there was a big gap in between. I was not really an author. I'm saying I did write these books, but it was not, not patterned and not planned. About 5 years ago, I got an offer from Ashwin Sanghi, the author. And he's a friend and a family friend. So met him and, casually, and then just chatting. And he said, Doc, I've written this book on 13 steps. I'm doing the series. And I've done 13 steps on how to make money and 13 steps on something else. I said, what is the use of money if you don't have good health? How will you enjoy it?
Absolutely, yeah.
How will you enjoy
Say
it?
that again and again.
I said, how will you enjoy it? There's no point on having money if you don't have good health. So your series is incomplete if you don't write a book on, okay, doc, let's do it together. I said, done. And that's how it happened. Like I told you, everything in my life is like this, And let's do it. So for 1.5 years, I worked with that book. And I learned so much from Ashwin, I can't tell you. Because just about, I've been marketing services, treatments, in my company, homeopathy as a category. But marketing a book is a total different ballgame altogether.
So let's talk about your latest book, The Nation's Homeopath.
So then I did that book with him with Wesleyan.
Okay.
And then I got well paid for it as well because of maybe it was Ashwin Sanghi. And then after that, I got into this bandwagon of, so he introduced me to a literary agent. He said, don't go on your own. Mm-hmm. And either you self-publish. I said, no, I don't want to self-publish. Or you get, so then I went to a literary agent in Jaipur, CI. And then she took my book, like The Nation's Homeopath, which was my next book. And then, of course, I had 2-3 publishers, very good publishers who wanted to publish it, but they ultimately refused. And this was during COVID time. So they said, we're happy to publish the book, but we only want to know how you created the brand. So they wanted a management book. And I said, I don't want a management book. I want a book on my life so people can learn from the mistakes I've made. Ultimately, then there was some compromise, and then I signed up with HarperCollins, and that's how then this book, The Nation's Homeopath, came. So after that, I decided that every year I'll write a book. And so then last 5 years, I've published one book or the other.
This is an extremely interesting book. And you know what? I would request you to read any part of the book that has your soul in it. Of course, the whole book has, but some part that you think, that you really like.
Anything. I think I'll start from the beginning because that's really so this is, about my grandparents and how during the World They had to leave everything behind. They were doing very, very well. But, everything had to be left behind. And my grandfather, my Nana, he was quite an egoistic person because he was self-made. And I remember the story that he used to tell me and my mother as well, that the ship was ready, they had first-class cabins, and they had, these huge trunks. That time you got these huge steel trunks, and he had got one or two of them, in his car at the docks. And I remember that then he's telling me that, the loaders over there knew it was war. And they said, we'll charge you 100 rupees for one trunk in the 40s at that time, And he was very egoistic. He said, I've got 10 servants in my house. I'll send my driver back and I'll get the guys and I'll, do all of that. I don't need to pay you guys. And as luck would have it, the ship started moving 1 hour earlier because there was a riot. And the only thing that my grandfather could carry was himself and whatever little money he had in his pocket. And you could see everything being left behind on the shore.
Oh my God.
And his first class cabin, there was nothing like first class. They slept on the floor. And they then came to Madras, which was now Chennai. And then they took a train to Sialkot. And then going to Sialkot, again the same thing happened. Then there was partition. And then they saw bloodshed, and then again they had to leave everything behind. So he was into sports goods. He had a very large sports good business. And he then came back and settled in Agra. And then that's where I spent a lot of my childhood with him. So this last paragraph is from the first chapter of my Nana, who had an important role in my life because he gave me a lot of value systems, he, my mother and my Nani. Then partition happened. Papaji and his family walked thousands of miles from Sialkot to the newly carved Indian territories. Along the way, they saw people being slaughtered. They saw babies and children crying and so much other suffering. The family made it to Delhi. My mother eventually studied medicine in Lady Hardinge Medical College and moved to Lucknow after marrying my dad, Dr. M.C. Batra, a homeopath. Papaji settled in Agra and built his life from scratch for the third time. This instant with a leather goods business. So I always tell people that, मैं तो मोची का बेटा हूँ. Because I actually learned how to make a shoe. Because my grandfather had a shoe factory and I used to go there and work with the laborers over there. First sports and now leather, both demanding resilience and toil, were apt metaphors for my grandfather's life. And on 1st July 1951, I was born in Lucknow, the son of a mother who was an allopathic doctor and a father who was a homeopath, making me a product of mixopathy.
That was fantastic. What an awesome part of the book. And this is absolutely, it just takes me back. I could just sense and see it all when you were talking about it because it's so, it's so visceral.
Yes, I had 4 authors for my book, co-writers as well. And like I said, I wrote this book with a lot of discipline. And
writing a book is discipline.
But people don't realize that. But I used to write 1,000 words every day. Until I did that, I never slept. And then I had a group of people, and one of them was Akshay Savai, very good writer, who did a lot of it, kind of rewrote it again. And the whole thought of this whole book was that it should be very visual. It should look like a screenplay. So when you're reading the book, you should be able to picturize what's happening. And you'll see in the next chapter also where I talk about Agra, I'm actually talking about the pigs roaming in the slush and all of that. So a lot of the book is actually, a lot of the book is very, very visual.
It is.
And I hope one day it gets converted into an OTT or a movie because it can be inspiration for other people. And my whole purpose of writing the book was only this, that people should benefit from my life and all the troubles that I went through and the difficulties that I had and the failures that I had so that they should not repeat it and their life becomes easier.
What would you like to tell aspiring, students who want to take up homeopathy, looking at you as an example of what they can do? Of course, we've heard you talk about the hardships, but what would be those 3 words that you'd like to leave with them?
Believe in yourself. That's the strongest message I can give. Because I believed in myself. Against all hardships, I kind of pushed and, ultimately got there. They say perseverance is the key to success. And I'd like to quote a small little Urdu couplet for you and your viewers and listeners. कदम चूम लेती है मंजिल आकर, कदम चूम लेती है मंजिल आकर, अगर राही खुद अपनी हिम्मत ना हारे. And I've seen a lot of young people today, they give up too easily. They don't try hard enough. And they keep changing their roles, they keep changing their jobs, they keep changing, they're so impatient. I understand that this is the 2-minute Maggie noodle generation. But you need to wait. Medicine is not built overnight. A practice is not built overnight. Like I said earlier, that you got to bring in results. And with chronic cases, it takes a little time. So you have to be very patient, and you have to believe in yourself. I'm saying I have never invested in the stock market. Not now, of course. I have investments, but I'm talking about in the early days, because I believed in myself. Because I believe, why should I give my money to somebody else to earn for me? I should earn it because I know how to do my work very well. And so my entire company has been a bootstrap company. We have grown through internal accruals, starting from zero, and then growing, and putting everything back into the company. So when I started my company, then I had no money. So then I put in, for every new branch, I put in my own money. And then I grew it. So I never took anything out. And then if I open a new vertical, like a product company, then for 10 years, I lost money in the product company. So whatever I made in the service company, I put in the product company, I lost it. And then now last few years, it's now become profitable and it's doing well. So, it needs a lot of belief in yourself, because if you believe that you're doing something good and you know that you will succeed, but if you mentally think that you already lost them, that I can't succeed, I'm not going to get patients, I won't have any money out of this profession, then you're a lost cause. So I think the strongest thing is that you must believe in yourself and you must be very persistent. And ultimately, what is the goal again? So it's also important, that not just you have a kind of a vision. I also believe, for example, and I tell this to young people as well in my talks that I go to, IITs and things like that, that just don't, always dream high, but keep your feet on the ground. So dream from the sky, don't dream less, but keep your feet on the ground. So be grounded in whatever you do.
Forever.
Yes. The higher you go, the more grounded you should be.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you on that. But last that I think, I think quite a few of our listeners would want to know would be some quick tips, especially because a lot of people are talking about losing hair, and from the cosmetic perspective, what is it that they need to do if they were to get in touch? And would that be a very long treatment if they were to go through it?
So first of all, there is no cosmetic treatment in hair. That's totally a myth. You can't go to a parlor to get your hair treatment done. You can go to a parlor to get your hair beautified, to get it highlighted, to do all of that, to get the curls out, to straighten your hair, all that you can do. But you cannot get rid of medical hair loss in a parlor. And just to let you know that there are 40 basic reasons, medical reasons for hair loss. So unless you can identify it, like we spoke about, for example,
PCOS.
About PCOS in women. So the 3 commonest in women, PCOS is one. Number 2 is anemia. So 60% of women in the bigger cities are anemic in India. And
60%?
60%, as high as that. So unless you do a ferritin level and unless your iron improves, and when it does, then within 3 months your hair falling stops and your hair grows back. So that's called CT. That's a very, a nice form of hair loss to have, because all your hair comes back and it's easy to treat. But then you have PCOD and then you have thyroid. So these are the commonest kind of medical reasons. Like this, there are other reasons for other kinds of hair losses, other types of hair loss. So it's a medical thing. It's not easy. There are specialists called trichologists to actually deal with hair loss. My son is one of them. He's graduated from London, and then he's come back and he's taught all our doctors all the latest techniques. Even now, presently, also he's now in Dubai, because he always picks up the best systems and techniques that are happening in hair and skin from all over the world. And then we bring them to India, then we research them, then we introduce them, then we train our doctors. So it's a long process. But so there's no easy answer. But having said that, you just look after your hair. It's important to realize, number one, that you eat properly. That's very important, because lots of hair loss is nutritional. So because women are fasting too much, or they're not eating on time, or they're not eating the right kind of food, That's why your hair gets lost. Okay, remember, hair is protein. So if you're not taking enough protein, you're going to lose hair. That's number one. So eat well. Number two, sleep well. People don't seem to understand the relationship between good sleep and hair loss and good hair. If you sleep well, your hair will be better. The third is avoid chemicals as far as possible. So we are using too much of chemical shampoo, too much of chemical conditioners, too much of chemical treatment in parlors, straightening hair and all of that. All of that is harmful for the hair. So if you don't do that and you use natural products for your hair, the chances are that you will keep a lot of it on your scalp and for a very long time.
Thank you for being on today's show. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Mohua Show.
I'd like to end by humming a two lines for your viewers. This is my vision for a happier world. It's Kishore Kumar's old song. I sing it for my grandson, who's now 18, by the way. And I think all of us, your listeners, should that's the wish that I have for the world. चल के तुझे मैं लेके चलूं एक ऐसे गगन के तले जहां गम भी ना हो आंसू भी ना हो बस प्यार ही प्यार पले एक ऐसे गगन के तले एक ऐसे गगन के तले एक ऐसे गगन के तले. So with that happy note, thank you very much for having me on your show. It was such a delight and such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To you, our dearest listeners, you can find us on your favorite streaming services, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, and of course on all other major streaming services. With loads of love, we are The Mohua Show, where we talk ईमानदारी से.